Hey everyone, what is this video about? It's about a certain debate. The debate is whether, if the US bombs Iran and follows Israel's lead, meaning both Israel and the US attack, just how much damage would actually be done to Iran's nuclear facilities? This is a hotly debated issue in the US. On June 22, 2025, the U.S. military launched a precision airstrike on Iran's three major underground nuclear facilities. First, let me tell you, this plan was drafted during Biden's administration. So it's not something that could be decided quickly. The whole operation was drafted by Biden, but of course, Biden wouldn't actually use it. Biden isn't someone who resorts to force easily, and it would cost a lot of money. You know, when you send out 6B-2 bombers, after a 30-hour mission, the maintenance and repairs they need are pretty serious. Those stealth coatings have to be reapplied, and that's the easy part. Then there are the aerial refueling planes, the F-16 escorts. Over 100 aircraft were deployed. The U.S. only has a little over 20 of these bunker buster bombs in total, and they used 14 of them, more than half. These bunker buster bombs are really expensive because the warheads are made of extremely tough metal so they can withstand heat and impact. And there were also 30 Tomahawk missiles involved. So what exactly happened? The U.S. military dropped the 30,000-pound GBU-57. They specifically targeted deeply buried nuclear facilities located at Natanz, Fordow, and Isfahan. First and foremost, it was Reuters that initially broke this significant news story, and they based their comprehensive report on crucial information obtained directly from the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, which is notably one of the 18 distinct intelligence agencies operating within the United States. The initial assessment is that this operation only delayed Iran's nuclear program by a few months, so it wasn't very effective. This is according to the Defense Intelligence Agency's report. This report is classified, but someone took it out and leaked it to Reuters and CNN. The DIA estimates that Iran could resume its main enrichment activities in as little as 1 to 2 months. You can resume a small amount of enrichment activity easily, but resuming the main enrichment operations is, of course, not that simple. 3 people familiar with the matter said that the vast majority of centrifuge cores remain intact. The airstrike mainly damaged surface and auxiliary facilities. What did he say? He said that power generation facilities and ventilation, among other things, were destroyed. But most of the centrifuges were not damaged, so after a few months of repairs, they could probably be operational again. All right, Iran said that 3 nuclear facilities were targeted in the preemptive strike, but they had already moved the nuclear materials in advance, so there were no major losses. They don't actually have that much nuclear material, so it was easy to move. Satellite images confirmed that before the attack, many trucks had already gone in to transport things out, and there was no one left inside. This is according to the report from the Department of Defense's DIA, but this is a simplified version. The DIA report contains many assumptions and states that these are preliminary findings. This is not final, and they need to conduct further research. This report hasn't been submitted up the chain yet. It's a draft report, meaning it can't be given to the Secretary of Defense or the President. It's just a provisional report, and it contains a lot of assumptions. This is very rigorous. The Institute for Science and International Security, ISIS, which has the same acronym as the Islamic State, states that the attack has in fact already destroyed Iran's centrifuge enrichment program. The time required to convert uranium to weapons grade for a nuclear bomb has increased significantly, and it will take a long time to restore to the pre-attack level. Everyone should pay attention to the different reports, because what they say actually differs a bit. The report above says that auxiliary facilities were destroyed, but many centrifuges remain intact, so recovery is possible. But it must be said that, basically, the main facilities have already been destroyed. And to fully restore everything, that's really difficult, I believe. If you have to rebuild from scratch after being bombed to pieces, it's not easy at all. In fact, it's even harder than building it new. This is about restoring to the pre-attack level, but what if there's no attack and only part of it is restored? If you can't restore everything, the time needed to convert uranium for weapons into a nuclear bomb increases significantly. If you originally had 3,000 centrifuges and 1,000 of them are damaged, leaving you with 2,000, no matter how you try to refine, the process will be slower, so the time increases significantly. That's basically the explanation. ISIS actually has evidence. They used high-resolution commercial satellites and discovered 6 bomb craters on the mountain at Fordow. 6 massive craters were blasted completely through the terrain, and actually, that's precisely how it is. Each individual crater was most likely made using 2 of those incredibly powerful bunker buster bombs. The head of ISIS is a very authoritative organization, the International Atomic Energy Agency. This is a very neutral institution, and we should trust what they say. David Albright determined that Fordow has been almost completely destroyed, with the main facility reduced to scorched earth. The Fordow nuclear plant is deep in the mountains, situated on a mountain. Inside the 2 uranium enrichment halls, there were 3,000 precision centrifuges installed. These are auxiliary devices, meaning power generation equipment, ventilation systems, and so on. Tunnel entrances, security perimeters, he drilled 3 holes here and 6 holes there. He estimates that the main hall is located here, and if the bombing reached it, it probably broke through because some evidence was visible. There was also some cement dust that flew out, which must mean it was hit by the blast. If the main hall is here, it has basically been destroyed. ISIS said, many ventilation shafts in Natanz and Isfahan have collapsed. You know there have to be ventilation shafts underground, otherwise you'd suffocate. The surface buildings have been leveled, and the heavy water reactor has also been destroyed. The heavy water reactor is used for nuclear reactors. All right, ISIS said that Isfahan is not Fordow. The nuclear facility there was attacked twice by Israel and once by the US military. The uranium metal enrichment and conversion plant was destroyed. That plant was destroyed, and the main uranium conversion facility for turning natural uranium into uranium hexafluoride suffered severe damage. If Iran wants nuclear weapons, it would have to build a new uranium enrichment plant. In other words, when you talk about enrichment up to 60%, some even up to 90%, actually the Atomic Energy Organization has looked into it. Why does he tell you how much there is? They went to check their uranium, calculated the numbers, and figured out how many years it would take, far more than just a few months. So, how long would it actually take them to make a nuclear weapon? The previous report said a few months, but he says several years. Let's take a look at ISIS's assessment and other sources. The Natanz uranium enrichment facility was struck by an Israeli air raid on June 13th. On the 22nd, 2 GPUs were ordered. The main underground hall was heavily damaged by bunker buster bombs, causing the facility to cease operations. A huge hole has already been blasted through it, making restoration very difficult. The above-ground electronics testing plant was destroyed, and the most important underground work hall was penetrated. This is uranium enrichment, and it's extremely difficult to restore. At Fordow, on June 22nd, the US military carried out an airstrike, dropping 12 GPUs, mainly targeting this area. The ventilation shaft and the end of the long hall were hit with precision strikes, creating 2 or 3 penetrating craters, affecting the entire hall of centrifuges. The likelihood of it being completely destroyed is extremely high. This is a very high estimate, basically equivalent to total destruction. It's a strategic facility located deep in the mountains. It was originally highly resistant to destruction, but it was still wiped out. In Isfahan, there were 2 Israeli airstrikes and 1 US airstrike. Natural uranium is converted into uranium hexafluoride there. You have to convert natural uranium into uranium hexafluoride before you can make nuclear weapons. With this facility damaged, repairing it would be extremely difficult. The Isfahan tunnel complex. 4 main tunnel entrances have collapsed and would need to be re-excavated. The difficulty of restoring them ranges from medium to high. As for heavy water, the dome of the reactor was penetrated by a strike. The heavy water supply chain has been disrupted, and restoring it would be moderately to highly difficult. The reactor pool has been damaged, but this has not been confirmed. I'll share my thoughts on this at the end. However, ISIS says that Iran has preserved its stockpiles of uranium, such as 60% and 20% enriched uranium. And they have also manufactured, but not yet installed, centrifuges. These undestroyed components still pose a threat to the world. In the future, these could be used to produce weapons-grade uranium. Let me tell you, right now they're saying that some has already been enriched to 90%. To go from 90% to over 95% requires further enrichment, and that's what qualifies as weapons grade. You need it to be that highly enriched in order to trigger a chain reaction. He said that this further enrichment still poses a threat to the world. Al Jazeera interviewed the spokesperson for Iran's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who admitted that the nuclear facility had suffered serious damage. Donald Trump, of course, immediately jumped up and vehemently called it fake news, emphatically stating that CNN is entirely all about fake news. The New York Times, working closely together with them, attempted to significantly downplay what was, in fact, one of our most remarkably successful military operations in all of history. They tried to downplay it, but Iran's primary nuclear facility was completely and utterly destroyed. Break time equals 0.5s/The Times and CNN. Were proven wrong. They owe those B-2 pilots an apology. This is fake news. These are indeed made by Trump haters, deliberately and intentionally trying to undermine him, because this was Donald Trump's, what he truly saw as a major and significant victory. His tariffs were a mess, and with Russia and Ukraine talking about a 24-hour ceasefire, if this time he really destroyed Iran's nuclear facility. And if Iran is willing to shift closer to the West and stop funding Hamas and Hezbollah, that would truly be a great victory for Donald Trump. This would be his win. He says, I should get the Nobel Peace Prize, but they won't give it to me. You know, that's what Donald Trump said. Iran's nuclear facilities have been reduced to zero. Anything else is fake news. Israel said there were reports that Israeli agents had gone to Fordow to check it out. To prove that it's been destroyed, that it's already been wiped out, I don't know if that's true. He's talking about Israel, Iran, ISIS, emphasizing that their nuclear facilities have already suffered heavy damage. The list compiled by Donald Trump erased the Israel Atomic Energy Commission, delayed for many years. The chief of staff of the Israeli Defense Forces said that major damage has set them back several years, and Iran has suffered severe destruction. Vance said that Iran is now further away from obtaining nuclear weapons than it was 24 hours ago. Defense Minister Hagelthess said the Air Force destroyed Iran's nuclear weapons production. Most of the statements he made were from his own people. There's no difference. 1, 2, and 3 are all him. But when it comes to the Israel Atomic Energy Commission and the Chief of Staff of the Defense Forces, they are more cautious because they won't overestimate their destructive capabilities. If Iran resumes making nuclear weapons, it would pose a threat to Israel, so what Israel says is much more careful. Of course, Iran wouldn't talk down about itself. The way he's put it together, that's how it is. U.S. Secretary of State Rubio completely dismissed it, saying this is severely damaged. The U.S. Special Envoy said that 12 bunker buster bombs penetrated the protective layers, and the Department of Defense oversaw the destruction, preventing them from quickly assembling nuclear weapons. This rapidly, well, what if it's not rapid? Does that work? The Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency said that because of the explosive power of the bombs and the extreme sensitivity of centrifuges to vibrations, there was significant damage. The U.S. confirmed attacks on the Isfahan nuclear facility and tunnel entrances, and the Natanz uranium enrichment site was also hit by penetrating bombs. We can rule out these 3. All of them are from the U.S. government. The Atomic Energy Agency put forward an interesting perspective. When the bomb penetrated, because it only exploded underneath, the explosive power, we actually don't know exactly what it was. You might be able to blow up the main hall, but were those things really placed there? What if they were separated, and the second one was covered by another protective shield? That's the thing, because you just don't know. In principle, it mainly depends on this mountain mass. Let's take another look together. The main area is down here, and you've hit 6 holes with your explosions. You did hit the things below, but is it possible that the lower part is divided into separate compartments, with some deeper and some shallower? You managed to hit part of it, but is it possible, this is what the International Atomic Energy Agency person said, that these centrifuges are very sensitive to vibrations. With such intense explosions and vibrations, they could be damaged. I buy that explanation. This is backed by international science. This is what ISIS says, the uranium enrichment was destroyed. The Foundation for Defense of Democracy says it's enough to render all the centrifuges scrapped or inoperable. According to research by American enterprises, 3 nuclear facilities suffered extremely severe damage, and it will take Iran several years to restore its nuclear capabilities. My own assessment is, was everything completely destroyed? I don't know. But it's obvious, if you look at the map, it's under the mountain, and if the explosion reached the underground bunkers, it must have caused massive vibrations, if what they say is true. Those centrifuges and heavy water machines really suffered tremendous damage, and once these are broken, they're not easy to fix. These sensitive machines are just like the semiconductor equipment at TSMC in Taiwan. If there's any vibration, realigning them becomes a huge hassle. I honestly didn't know centrifuges were so sensitive. This information gives me confidence. Most of those centrifuges also take a long time to repair, especially if the entrance gets blown up. They have to dig it out and fix it, which isn't easy at all. I agree with that. But whether they still have some new centrifuges stored away and unused, you just don't know. And whether those centrifuges are enough to refine the original 90% enriched uranium, that's also uncertain. Refining it further, increasing the enrichment by a few more percent to make 1 or 2 nuclear bombs, that possibility does exist. But large-scale enrichment, like they used to do before, that capability probably won't be restored for quite some time. That's my conclusion. As for what Donald Trump says, the US and Iran will have talks about the nuclear agreement next week, but the nuclear deal is already irrelevant now, because the United States has already bombed it to pieces. First, let me say again, I'm very glad that this time Iran's nuclear facilities were destroyed. I really dislike the Iranian regime, and this time Donald Trump's strike was just right. It settled the question of whether Iran would give up its nuclear facilities. Because bombing it to pieces basically solves everything, and it also deals a huge blow to the reputation of the Iranian government. Donald Trump will then use sweet talk to coax Iran, and no matter if it's with Hamas, Hezbollah, Syria, or Iraq. All of Iran's proxies have suffered major blows, except for the Houthis. They've all been bombed to death. At this point, I believe there are many people in Iran who hope to shift toward a more moderate, pro-Western path in order to improve their standard of living and to better the treatment of their people. That kind of hardline approach will be hard to sustain, and this is actually beneficial for world peace. And it also isolates China and Russia.